So I just need to remake a video that I posted a week ago. Back then, there was kind of two potential fathers, or at least we were all convinced that it was one person, the guy who died. And we were certain that that was the only person involved until November the 27th. And then my sister was talking about going off with this guy, a guy who I know pretty much hates Sophie and said terrible things about her like a year ago, and yet somehow I didn't understand why he was wanting to go to abroad with her and stuff. And I kind of went to go and find out what was going on. And yeah, he thought the child was his. So that was a bit of a something we weren't expecting. But Sophie was saying that she liked, well, she wanted there to be a father, and was saying that she was saying or encouraging this possibility, but he was also convinced that the timings and stuff were all right. So it was really hard to know, when you've got two people kind of that you think are liars or can lie about things, it's hard to kind of know what the truth is. But yeah, I was always kind of um, mindful to the fact that maybe it's right, and maybe he is the father. But yes, it turns out that the results are in drum roll, and he's not the father, so it is definitely Thomas's, which is kind of what we thought. I mean, I've been looking at signs and stuff, like that video that there's a movie that I went to, The Close, where someone lost his best friend and then kind of was grieving over it, and it kind of reminded, and he was called Leo as well, and this child is going to be called Leo, although Donnie actually wanted him to be called Michael. Well, Michael Lance, and I commented that Lance sounds like lice, and because he's been talking about having pubic lice, I feel like that's probably not an appropriate name to call. But anyway, and then he was like, yeah, no, we'll stick with Michael. I prefer Michael. But I actually like Leo. Leo is supposed to be a lion, and he was like, oh, I really hate Leo because um, it's like a lion, and lions eat their own baby cubs, and that's what Sophie's doing. Sophie's eating her own baby cub. I don't know. He takes insults, he exaggerates, and it's really quite harsh towards Sophie. Okay, I agree with a lot of the insults, but I don't agree with the others, and with some of them. And yeah, I like the name Leo, and I kind of wanted the child to be called Leo, but I think if he was the father, he would have definitely tried to change it and make it something else. But yeah, anyway. So it's definitely Thomas's, which okay, I'm glad about, but at the same time, it is true that it would be better to have a living father than a dead father. Um, but it's more complicated if you don't particularly like the father, in which case maybe a dead father is not better. But if if this baby doesn't have a father, then I know that my chances of having more of an involvement in his life are far greater. If Donnie would have been the father, if Sophie loses a child, there's, I would say, a high chance that it's going to go to me. But yeah, it's true that the social workers need to believe that I'm not crazy for that to happen. And if they think that I think they're of Christ, and if they don't believe me, then maybe they do think I'm crazy. But I don't know. But yeah. Um, if the child doesn't have a father, I'd feel like a stronger connection towards him, because I would feel like, there's it's Sophie or me. Whereas if Donnie was the father, then I would feel like maybe that I have a a chance of having the child for a while. But it's true, fathers have more rights than aunties. So if this Donnie guy was able to get an apartment and a flat, and he's actually quite good with kids. I think it's older kids like above 6 or whatever. But yeah, if the child would have been his, then there's a high chance that the child will not be living with me for very long, if he does live with me. I have very big concerns with my sister, and I don't want to go into them. I feel like if social work services feel their problems, I think they need to find these problems without me. But at the same time, I'm hugely concerned, because Sophie does say some strange things, like there was a video where she was holding the baby in extremely looking uncomfortable position, like the baby was kind of like that, and he was in that position for an hour, and I kept being like, Sophie, are you sure the baby should be like that? Can you make him look more comfortable? Oh, it's fine, it's fine. And I kind of just wanted to see how they would react, like my mom and my sister, and both of them just completely oblivious. Oh, yeah, it's fine. And Sophie said, oh, this is what he would have been like in the womb. I felt, and this is what he was like in the womb. So he's used to being like this. And babies are actually really strong. And yeah, I didn't agree. I sent the video to Donnie. Donnie sent it to the social workers. I knew he would do that. But yeah, when the social workers basically called Sophie straight away and told about this video, and then Sophie had a massive screaming fit where she was like, "Why are you going against me? Why did you do this?" And so like, you shouldn't hold the baby in that position. And if Ian is the only one that can tell you to not hold the baby in that position, then he's got to be the one to do it because you're not listening to me. But yeah, during this screaming fit, she was also talking about how I just want to go to Africa, and you can do whatever you want with your baby in Africa. You know, the people in Africa, they can do whatever they want with their babies, and I just want to get the passport and go to Africa. Okay, it's an empty threat, and I don't think she's going to do that. But at the same time, I don't know with my sister. You know, I had a client that actually had that same thing happen to her. The child was going to be taken off this woman, and she quickly grabbed the child and went to Africa. And I think she went to a family member in Africa. So she actually had a family member, but this family member didn't agree that she could look after the child. And I think they managed to get the child back. And I don't really know. I can't remember the story. I can't remember the story. It was a long time ago, but I know that is an actual real story that happened to me. And the fact that Sophie said that kind of twigged and reminded me of this story that someone told me. And it's just like, is Sophie serious about that or not? I mean, she's really keen to get this passport very quick. I mean, I don't think she's going to do that, but it is very concerning the fact that she thinks that if social services think you can't look after a child running to Africa where you can do whatever you want with the child, you know, she thinks that even if that thought comes to her mind as a good possibility, you know, it's really concerning because, yeah, okay, a lot of terrible things happen to kids, but a lot of kids in Africa die as well. So if you think doing whatever you want with the kids is a good thing, you know, that's just some things she said, like, I want to go to Africa because they don't sterilize bottles over there and stuff. I mean, technically, she's never been to Africa, so she doesn't know what they do or anything. But yeah, she's thinking of the poor people. But they breastfeed, so they don't actually have bottles or use bottles. And if they did use bottles, I don't know, because some of them must struggle to breastfeed, and I don't know what they do about sterilizing. But it's true that a lot of babies over there die. Hence, using that as an example as to why you should do whatever you want with a baby is not a good example, and it's very concerning that she brought that up. It's not something that I would go to the social services about. Why? Because maybe she was just saying this out of anger. Maybe she's not serious. But yeah, is she? I don't know. It's just things like this that I'm concerned about. And but yeah, it's I want to retell the nativity scene. I made a post about it, but because I didn't quite know who the father was at then. I was probably like 80% sure it was Thomas's, but 20% thinking maybe it is Donnie's. I mean, one of his reasons why he thought it was his, because he was younger and fitter and hotter, and his sperm is much better than the old man's. But it's just like, are you just saying that because your ego's too big, or are you saying that because it's the truth? I don't know, but whatever. I yeah, the nativity, this new nativity that I feel like is modern day nativity. The olden day one is all about problems. You know, you got a king who wants to kill all the firstborns, and yeah, there was a lot of kings back then in 2,000 years ago that just wanted to kill everyone basically. But anything to get power, anything to make them look good. But yeah, life was so bad back then that a baby dying wasn't necessarily the worst thing. I think a baby living was probably the worst thing because they had no TV, they had no McDonald's, they had no electric blankets, they had no windows, they had nothing back then. So it's just like, but yeah, modern day version of that is social services trying to take kids away. Now, I 100% did not agree with social services taking kids away, unless, of course, you have evidence to prove that they can't do it, which is why I'm very in favor of putting like cameras inside any labor room, or not labor room, but the birthing room for like 24 hours afterwards. Just as I'm very for that, because if you think someone can't look after a child, you need to have evidence to prove that they can't do it. And I don't know what they've got, but I have seen evidence that makes me question Sophie's ability. Okay, she did get a lot better, but then again, she also knows that I'm reporting everything that I see. Hence, was she actually getting better, or was she just trying to convince me that everything was fine and she was going to do a good job? So I still, I'm not convinced. Yes, but anyway, the nativity scene. So you've got the social services trying to take a dehydrated baby, which she was a bit at the first. Although that is a very common thing. You know, you don't realize you don't know how much a baby's drinking when you breastfeed, and so if the baby's not getting enough, you can't necessarily blame the mother, because technically, if the baby's half asleep, sucking but also sleeping, it's hard to know how much he's getting. So, but yeah, then you've got the sort of bipolar mum who, at the time, I'm still maintaining that I kept seeing her change from being really wanting a kid to sometimes not wanting the kid or looking at him with disgust. And that is what I saw. I saw it less later on. But yeah, maybe she's just taking time to build a stronger bond. But yeah, she has mental problems. She says strange things, wanting. She's told me that she would love to have lots of babies, 6 babies by 6 different guys. I can have a baby. My mum can have a baby. The social services that really want to take kids away, they can have a bunch of kids. She's told me things like this. Someone says something like this, you have to think, are they serious? Are they joking? Is there something wrong with their mental health? And she's told quite a few people this thing. So a part of me thinks that she's serious. So she's obviously got something wrong with her. My mum, of course, can't tell anything. So she's up there thinking that everything's fine. Nothing's wrong with anything. And Sophie's not mentally ill. It was all COVID that made her lose the first child or have problems with the first child and not see him for years. And then you've got the Joseph figure, who, okay, in the old story, the Joseph figure um, leaves when he's, well, you don't really hear from him when the child gets beyond 2 or something. I can't remember what age, but yeah, you only hear from him when he's younger. And I don't know, this guy cared a lot about the child. He helped Sophie because of feeding, because he felt sorry or wanted to help make the baby feel more healthy. Plus, he thought he might have been the father. So, but yeah, he did a big favor for the baby. But at the same time, he is reporting a lot of stuff to social services, and I think he's going over the top sometimes with some of the things that he says. I eat reduced foods, but that doesn't mean that I'm full of bacteria. I like my reduced foods just as much as Sophie does. And yeah, I don't know. Sometimes he says things that are not true. But yes, I but yeah, so in the olden days, the past would be like, I don't know, 12-year-olds getting pregnant, and that was what Mary was supposed to be. She was supposed to be like a 12-year-old, whereas modern day, I think mental health is such a big thing, and there's loads of people with mental health problems having babies and probably not being able to look after them very well. I believe my sister was Princess Margaret in a past life, which was a queen who existed in the 14th century. I'm pretty sure people back then had like so were really shit at looking after babies. They had no ability to really work out hygiene and cleanliness. And I don't know, all the problems that Sophie is making now is probably something that would be very typical of people from that age, because they weren't very smart, they weren't very developed, their souls weren't very along, their souls hadn't been developed. And I feel like that's why her soul isn't very developed. I mean, you can call it mental health problems, or you can call it autism, or there's a number of things that you can call it, bipolar or schizophrenic. But really, I think the reason why people have these mental problems is because their souls just aren't developed and aren't able to connect with rational thoughts or modern day stuff. And also, I think as a queen, she would have just had loads of babies and just got servants to look after them. So she didn't actually develop any ability to look after babies, because back then that's not what rich people did. They had servants to look after the babies, and they just saw them once a month. There was quite a lot of people in that situation. And I think a lot of the problems that she's having right now are because of her just not being a very developed soul. Um, but yeah, and then so in that nativity scene, you've got the sort of mum that's, yeah, that's just it. And then of course my dad again with thinking it's okay to want to take a 5-day old baby to the zoo, and also hardly ever looking at him. I don't know, literally about 5 seconds is about the longest I've seen him look at the child. He likes the idea of there being a child in the house. But yeah, if the child cries for more than 5 minutes and he hears it, oh, close the door, stop opening the door. I don't want to hear it. Like, he has no interest in the child. And so, yeah, if social services generally believe that 2 people are better than 1 person, they really need to rethink that. If 1 person is so uninterested in the child that the only thing they want to do is close the door and see the child for like a few seconds, if they haven't realized that some fathers are that useless. There are some oaths they believe that babies are for women and men make money and do us other stuff. If that's the sort of relationship, or that's what the granddad or father is like, then basically the woman is doing it by herself. And yeah, to think that two people is better than one when the reality of one of the parents is so, or grandparent in this situation, is just so uninterested. You know, two is not better than one if one is just that uninterested. And unfortunately, that is what my dad is like. And he was like that for most of my childhood too. You saw him about 10 o'clock at night, and he went straight into his bedroom, had no interest in talking to you. I think he's autistic too. I mean, again, you can call it autism when I think actually his past life was a long time ago, a very long time ago. And I don't think he developed any social skills then either, because social skills didn't actually exist. I think he actually was born in, I think his past life was in China when the first bridge was made. There was this weird conversation where I was talking about something and he just said something that made no sense whatsoever, but it made sense to what I was talking about in my head, and it made me feel like he was someone born in China and lived a pretty much isolated life, but also helped build one of the first bridges. But yes, you can call it autism, but I actually just call it a soul that hasn't developed certain things. You know, a soul can develop personality or ability to talk or ability to even hormones. You know, sometimes people say bipolar is where you can't control your hormones, but I feel like if your soul isn't strong enough, sometimes you create your own hormones. You know, you can create a happy feeling, you can create the sad feeling, and if your soul isn't developed, then I feel like you can't control your own um, hormones in a way, and therefore, yeah, it's not all down to, but it's not all down to the biological. A lot of people would put the mental illness down to biological only, which means that if reincarnation is true and you die and come back to life in a body of someone who's got bipolar, you know, you would think that's possible. Well, I don't actually think that's possible because I feel like these mental illnesses are actually formed because of people's souls not being able to control the hormones that they create or the feelings that they create, because they can't focus on positive things or they can't focus on the right things to get an intelligent sort of feeling. You know, your feelings are controlled by how you think and what you think and your level of thinking. And if you don't have a good level of thinking, then you can get depressed too easily or something like that. And you know, I'm brought up in a family full of nutcases, basically, and yet I can control. I'm not mad. Okay, I have some madness in me, yes, because I have personality, and I might do things slightly differently to how other people do it, but I find that fun. But yes, that's just my view on mental illness, and I feel like I can speak about mental illness quite highly because I've got so many mentally ill people in my family. But yes.